Hey, good morning, CSL Palm Desert. Look at this beautiful background. I've now become high tech. Jeffon, are you there?
I am here.
There he is.
Tada.
Hey,
Yes.
Jeffon is here. So, isn't this cool? I just got a green screen. I've never had a green screen before. I'm always looking at the back of my house, and it's kind of boring to look at a closet. So, I know, dude, $50, $50, and you can improve your look. That's all I'm going to say. So, welcome everybody. Welcome to. Today is January 18th. It is a beautiful day, and I can't wait to talk to you today, Jeffon. I haven't talked to you since I left in July, right?
Yeah, it is. When I received your message to be a part of this, I was looking forward to it. So thank you. I'm really,
Yeah,
really excited.
I mean, because I know I went off on my sabbatical, and then I wanted you and Charles to fill out your deal, and then we wanted to regroup. And now I thought, you know what, today's Martin Luther King's holiday, so
Yes.
I thought, what a better time to bring you onto the show, especially given not just what's happening in the Black Lives Matter movement, but what's happening in Washington D.C. and all over the country. And there's a lot of upheaval. And
Yes.
there's so many different opinions. And I have to be really honest with you, Jeffon, because I just before the show, I mentioned to you earlier, our spiritual leader of Centers for Spiritual Living, Dr. Edward Vigun, he sent out an email, and we decided as a leadership team to put it out there into the universe and put it on our social media. And it's gotten quite a response. Some good, some not so good, some positive, some very negative. And so I wanted to talk to you about that today, because there's a sensitivity that we have to address. We have to address that not everybody's on the same page at the same time. And no matter where you are in a faith community, not every faith community is the same. Not everybody's thinking the same. And especially in Palm Desert, we have a very unique demographic in our area. And, for many, many years, I've had to kind of walk that really sensitive line of, making sure that I don't get political and making sure that I don't take stands. And I just say, look, principle is principle. And when you teach principle, anyone can apply principle to what we're talking about. And they will, in return, begin to formulate an awakening based on their understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been sort of a challenge. Of course, I've been doing it now for almost 17, 18 years. And especially as things get to, the way they were last week, when it was genuinely unnerving. I mean, it was genuinely unnerving to watch the whole thing. And then, I don't know about you. Did you see it? Were you watching it live when it was happening?
Yeah, it's like I was glued to it. I watched your service about that, and yeah, but my mind it's like I couldn't get it out of my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I too became totally obsessed with what was going on, and I was glued to it, and I continued to stay glued to it, and that was a problem.
Yes,
because I lost all my sense of balance, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm becoming part of the problem here, not the solution. I'm becoming part of the problem. And what I've noticed, and I'm not sure about you, and see, I look at you, Jeffon, as you're one of the upcoming spiritual leaders of the world. You're young, you're articulate, you're a man of color, you have a very interesting background, you have a very interesting perspective, and I appreciate that. And I think that the world is really eager to hear how you and your leadership can help facilitate change in the world. That's why I wanted you back on the show today.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I wanted to hear from you today, of all days, Martin Luther King holiday, and celebrating, his philosophy of change and how do we get there. So before we begin, technically, I want to ask everybody, if you have a question, you have a concern. We're not here to get into giant debates, but we are certainly here to approach the subject matters that you want to talk about. So make sure you fill in the comment section. Let us know what you think, what you're feeling, questions that you may have for me or Jeffon, and we'll do our very best. So Jeffon, fill me in. What's been going on? I haven't seen you in a long time. What have you been doing in the world? Because I know you've been busy.
It's been incredible. It seems as if I was with the CSL Palm Desert community for many months. Rev Charles and I were talking, and it was like this was like my second home. I look forward to every Tuesday that we had as we went through the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. And in my world, things have been continuing to flow forward in terms of the programs and workshops that I've been doing with organizations, it's very fascinating to see the ones that are still continuing to champion the conversation of diversity, inclusion, equity, unconscious perceptions, and seeing that continue to unfold. It's fascinating because, I mean, that's just a foundational piece that we have to continue to talk about, continue to strengthen that muscle internally in order to see that external type of result that we're aiming to achieve. So been very, very busy with that, which I'm very grateful for. And then, yeah, had a chance to write the guides in Science of Mind magazine, which received incredible feedback from a lot of people. And then just enjoying life, you know, here in Southern California. It's winter is lovely, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a little trying with the COVID situation, but I heard that you made it to the golf course.
Yes. So I fixed that wicked right slide.
They're allowing people to go to the golf course, and I guess you and Reverend Charles went out and you did a record game for yourself, right?
Yeah, and I'll probably hold back from saying the record number because people will probably be like, "Oh my God!" Yeah.
See, the nice part about it is I heard that, but since I don't play golf, it means nothing to me.
It's okay. Well, then from that perspective, it was phenomenal.
It's just a number.
Yeah.
So, right. So tell me what, outside of the shows that you've been doing for us, how have you been reaching out to the communities, and what is your message right now? What are you saying to people, especially today on this holiday? What thoughts do you have about the evolution of just the world in general? I mean, this COVID thing has gone crazy, and there's a lot of conflict. There's just a lot of stuff. So what messages would you like to start with today so that we can, go together on this process?
The most important message, and I share this with everything, Dr. Joe, is the power of us individually being willing to recognize the inherent worth of the people who we share this planet with. Not only just recognizing the people we're around, people who may have different perspectives than us, but most importantly, recognizing that inherent worth inside of ourselves. And that then becomes kind of the bedrock that we can then bring that out to others. So from different CSL communities that I've had the chance to share, organizations that I have the chance to speak at, different schools and things that I have the opportunity to do work with, this idea of recognizing and honoring our own inherent worth, which, when we talk about principle, is something that is all encompassing, that it connects all of us. That seems to be, from my perspective, the one thing that we as the human race, our species, is really failing to grasp, and that is just authentic human interaction where we can honor and recognize the worth and dignity of the people that we stand alongside, even if they have a completely different perspective, outlook, or idea of the world.
Exactly. Now, okay, when that happens and you are faced with different, let's see, how do we say it? Different approaches and different feelings around something, given the fact where you are in consciousness and where you are in your awakening, how do you walk people to a different way of looking? Now, we're not trying to convince anybody of anything. What we're trying to do is open the doors of all possibilities and windows of all possibilities of ideas. And when you're approached with someone like that really is resistant, how do you craft your conversation? How do you say what you want to say so that you can keep the windows and doors open? What I have found over my experience, and I'll just share mine first, and I want to hear what you do, because you're totally different generation, you have totally different ideas. I have found that when I meet with a lot of resistance, I have to back up and do a lot more listening than I do speaking. Because every time I'm met with resistance on any subject matter, whether it's, what's going on in the world and the politics and the government and what's going on in healthcare, what's going on in relationships, no matter what it is, the foundation of all things, I think, is the foundation of communication. And how do I listen effectively and then respond without losing the listener or, the person I'm talking to? How are you dealing with that? How are you dealing with the pushback if you're getting any? Because I'm sure you are. And we're all getting pushback. How are you dealing with that pushback? And have you seen the needle start to move at all?
Yeah, well, I think kind of very much in alignment with what you just mentioned, trying to take this approach to be more interested than interesting and really genuinely try to see another person's perspective, not with the sense of completely shattering their beliefs or shaking them to the core, but listening to a point where perhaps I can learn something, perhaps I can see where they're coming from in a different light. And then from that, maybe I can then build a bridge to at least share what my outlook might be, and we can find some common ground. And if when there's pushback, which happens, sometimes you just have to be in this space where you realize that maybe this deep, in-depth conversation at this time with this person might not be the most appropriate. There may be another way that I have to approach this in the future, or at times maybe that's just it. I send you my love and I continue on my path.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I was mentioning, I think my show last week or the week before, that over the holiday, just engaging with people at all, even in Zoom conferencing and things like that, just engaging with people, and not over controversial issues, but when they're brought up, watching people and how they start to respond and think, okay, is this the appropriate time for me to mention this? Is this the appropriate time for me to move forward to this? And is there a little opening here? I'm always looking in consciousness for a little opening. And what I have found myself is that recently people have been coming into my life experience that have been so solidly entrenched in some ideas that, are very different than mine. What I find is that there's this opening on their part to have a conversation and a willingness. And I have to be very sensitive to how fast I move into that conversation and with what level of intensity. And so what I've been telling people, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is, look, everybody we're talking to right now, we're coming up on a huge week. I made the mistake of what I was working on at the gym today. I made the mistake of turning on the TV, and I heard some stuff that was going on at the Capitol building, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is, again, it's hitting really close to home. And I want to clue you in on something too. One of the reasons it's really hitting close to home with me is, I don't know if you know this or not, but my niece is married to a man who, her husband worked in the Sergeant of Arms office in the House of Representatives.
I heard you mention that. Yes.
And, anytime something happens like this, he was in direct danger getting everybody out of Congress and out of the hall when things were happening, and my niece she's part of the Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. So they're both very tapped in. Their kids are, staying with my sister so that, because they're on duty 24/7 for the next week or so.
Yeah.
And so when I hear things, I trigger differently than other people. And because my connection to it is not just the philosophical question. I now have my human relationships and connection in the middle of the controversy, whose safety is compromised and jeopardized. So I know that sometimes my approach is too intense for people. Mm-hmm. So I've had to actually step that back. Have you found that you've had to step back the intensity in which you approach these things? Have you found that that's something you need to work on?
Yeah, and there's times where I just need to be from my own personal perspective, more mindful, like you kind of mentioned, of how I approach certain conversations or certain people, whether they're close loved ones, whether they're friends, whether they're friends of friends, or people that I just know in my circle. But being mindful that not everybody is going to see the world that I see the world, and how ignorant of me to think that that's the only way you should see the world. And I've learned, the hard way in the past of saying things too fast, too harsh, too strong, that just completely, there was no sense of authentic conversation back and forth. It was very lopsided or one way.
It's funny, too harsh, too fast, too strong. Is that what you said?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That's why they call me Hurricane Hooper. You know that.
Yeah, Hurricane Hooper. Yeah. I like that. I like that.
Always said, Joe, you come in too fast, too hard, too hard. I mean, it's like you're too intense. So I myself, especially given the level of discourse, the level of all the controversies around, it's just been almost a whole year. where are we? Mid-January. So we started this mid-March. So we're 10 months into this entire situation. And I realized that it's really caused a lot of people to feel extremely passionate at what they believe. And also, I think it's necessary for us to not just listen to their passion, but allow ours to come through a little bit more gentle, like you said. And it's been a journey of communication. And that's at a time when we can't be in each other's company physically. It sure makes a difference. And I want to say in the not anonymity, but the way social media operates.
Yeah.
You can just push something out there and, all this reaction starts to happen, right? And people they read their own tone, they read their own attitudes and emotions into whatever you write. So it's a really interesting position. And I wanted to tell you that I really did appreciate what you did in the Science of Mind magazine and the dailies, because they were beautiful and they were very poignant and they were very on topic. They were very timely. I would call it that. They were
Thank you.
Given what we're working on in the world. So given the scope of the things that have happened and the things that are on the agenda this week for us as a country, how are you approaching that with your friends and your family? What is your approach about talking about just the philosophy of this? Because, principle is principle. And I've been telling Reverend Charles and I have had a lot of opportunity to talk lately. And one of the things we have to realize is principle is principle. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with religion. It's principle. You're teaching principle. And when you're doing that, you don't have to approach the issue itself as long as you're approaching principle. People will apply principle to a situation. And of course, they will come to their own conclusions based on their paradigm. But as long as we're continuing to stay on principle. So what is your message today? If you were to give a message today to people out in our community, what would you want to say to them that's steeped in your principle? Because I know I've been watching you on Facebook. I watch your posts all the time. And you have great posts, and they're very thought-provoking, and they're thought-provoking, not poking. I like that, because that thought-provoking is one thing, poking is another. I appreciate the fact that when I read your stuff, you're not poking at people, you're just going, okay. So what would be your message, Jeffon? What would you want to say to people today?
Yeah, well, I like that, thought-provoking, not poking. That's a powerful thought to think about. First, one thing that I want to say before I kind of get into that is I think that it is very beneficial to be able to have people where you can engage in deep conversations and have a mutual ground of respect to be able to do that, whether you see the same way or not. I mean, there's nothing better than to have a good friend or somebody in your family, or even just a good acquaintance, somebody in the spiritual community who you can just have this conversation with. That's extremely important. But I would say if I was to deliver a message, I was looking at a few of Martin Luther King's quotes and things, ones that don't get as much attention. And probably today, what I'm feeling is this one that he says, courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles. Courage breeds creativity. Cowardice represses fear and is mastered by it. So my message would be to be willing to embrace this idea of courageousness internally, venture into that unknown realm or territory that may be within yourself, and move forward in spite of the discomfort, in spite of the obstacles, despite of what may be happening in the external world. And as we embrace that sense of courageousness and move forward by that, suddenly we become more creative. We become more tapped into the present moment, to our ability to consciously respond to the things that are going on around us. And to the degree that we shift in here, so it is that the external world around us will begin to miraculously reflect that inner transformation.
That's interesting that you said that, because, I've been teaching this stuff for 20 years. Yeah, almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me the other day, I had an awakening on something that is so run, spot, run, science of mind 101, right? I was having lunch with some friends of mine, and they said to me, they said, you know, Joe, you keep waiting for the world to change so you can change your world. And I thought about it. And I said, he said, you know, Joe, you have to really change you and make a change so your world will change. That's what it ended up being. It came to that. You know, you're waiting for the world or COVID or, you know, an inauguration or some sort of revelation. You're waiting for things to change so that you can make a change in how you live your life. And maybe it's necessary for us to initiate that change within, and then not work and let the world catch up to the consciousness it's got the world trying to catch up to. And it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, your relationships, you know, you changing your relationship, changing, you know, how you feel about your health, how you feel about your finances, you know, all of those things. So when you apply this principle, you can apply it to either, you know, what's going on, you know, on the news channels and what's happening at our nation's capital this week or a couple of weeks ago, or what happened in Black Lives Matter, or what happens in COVID. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. If we apply principle to it and we say, you know what, when I have to make the change, I keep waiting for things. You know, we're waiting for a vaccine. We're waiting for this to happen. We're waiting for that to happen. And it feels like, Trey and I were talking about this the other day. It feels like we've had 10 months of our life being put on hold. And how old are you? You're pretty young.
Yeah, I'm in my 30s.
Yeah, shut up. So,
I mean, if you ask me how,
I didn't mean to say shut up, but that was too harsh.
Yes, I will remain quiet for the rest of our.
Like, shut up, 30s. Oh my God, in Palm Desert, you're considered a fetus. You know, you're so young. You're just so young. Wait a minute. We have a question here. Imagine a world where we could communicate with each other in love, respect, and authenticity, and completely disagree on mostly disagree, and walk away with a feeling of connection. I love that. Let me get back to that. Whoever that is, I don't know your name. It's called Nice Legend. Hang on, I'll come back to that. But so anyways, what I was saying was this. We keep waiting for things to change before we initiate our own personal change. And it's, you know, in Science of Mind, we know this, and I've been teaching this forever. And what I realized is when we were having this conversation about life on hold, who hit the hold button?
Yeah.
Which one of us hit the hold button on moving forward in any type of a plan and consciousness around any subject matter? You know, it's like we hit the hold button, and so we have to take the hold button off. You know, it's like for those people who are familiar with Zoom and conferencing, you know, we all, there's that little mute button, right? Many times and people will start talking away, but they've got the mute button on. Mm-hmm. You have to initiate taking it off and to be heard. Right. It's almost like the things, and I likened it this way when I was looking at it. I thought, you know what? It's like these Zoom conference calls. People are talking, but that's just their thoughts in their head. And it's not until you take the mute button off that you're actually heard. Other than that, it's just chatter in your head. But once you start having this conversation, once you start communicating, it does open the doors up. So what door would you open up? If you could open up a door right now and say, you know, when people log off the show, this is kind of something I want them to think about. Given today, I love that idea of the courage to make that. Read that quote one more time. Can you pull it up?
Yeah. So it says, courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles. Courage breeds creativity. Cowardice represses fear and is mastered by it.
Okay, so in fact, whoever Jeff, can you bring that, or Krista, can you bring that quote, that question that just came up? Yep. What if we could have the courage to have conversations, and then no one has to walk away feeling like they're the loser in the conversation?
That would be powerful.
Because that's what we're doing. There's winners and losers in these conversations, and we haven't created a space for safe communication and disagreement. There has to be, you know, I wonder, and I'm just thinking out loud here, I wonder if this is all a byproduct of the timing of things that's going on in the world. That, you know, would this, if we weren't in lockdown, if all these things were not happening, would there be this angst to get to the end game right away? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I wonder if this is adding to the fact that people just need something, just give me what, and I know this conversation because I have it in my head, just give me one thing that I can put a period and turn the page and write a new chapter. And it's so difficult given the scope of the things that are going on in the world around us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, there's so many things that are going on simultaneously that kind of are just hanging out there in the balance, but it doesn't dismiss or discount our ability to consciously assist in co-creating our individual reality.
Are you attracting new people into your experience that are in that awakened? They're not fully awakened, but there's a crack in the door of opportunity to bring people into that conversation.
It seems as if in the unique, circumstances that we are in, one thing that I feel that has been a hidden blessing with COVID and us kind of being in the midst of this pandemic, despite all of the loss of life and just disruption of life in the external world, has been the ability to really connect with people and to sit here in my, living room in Redlands, California, and be able, like yesterday, I was speaking at CSL St. George in southern Utah, and meeting people there, or doing these meditation sessions. I'm starting weekly with people in all different parts of the country. And it feels as if that has kind of opened the door in such a way to be able to authentically connect with people. But it seems as if a lot of those individuals are kind of leaning in my direction. And when I say my direction, in terms of my thought processes and whatnot. Right. What has been a little bit more difficult, and not difficult, but not as a parent, has been able to engage people who may think completely different than me, unless they're my family or friends or somebody who's close to me, where we can engage in that type of conversation.
Right.
Because I'm not going to go onto social media and start trying to tell people how to think. I mean, that's a slippery slope that it's not fun to slide down or try to climb back up.
Yeah, it's that poke thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not poking. It's,
provoking. No, it's not and not thought provoking. It's just pouring some gasoline on our.
Yeah, it's initiating. Yeah, exactly. It's putting gasoline on a fire that's already exploding. Yeah, it's been a challenge. And today, I mean, I was thinking about all the things that have been happening, and we could rehash everything, but I think everybody that's walked through this experience, we all know what we know. And that's what's interesting. I don't think anything that has surfaced, after an incident like that, after all this stuff that happens, and even like riots and things like that, everyone knows what the issue is. There isn't new information out there. It's the fact that we need to process what we already know and and transform it or change it, mm-hmm. so that we can apply something new to it. So, I mean, facts are facts. History is history. Now, how do we go forward in this experience, enlightened by whatever? And I have to say this: it's wherever people are coming from. There's so many different approaches to this. How do I get to that place where I feel peaceful in the presence of a lot of different people?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Have you ever read any of Jiddu Krishnamurti? He was an Indian philosopher back in the late 1800s. I think he passed maybe in like the 80s. He lived for quite some time. But he has a really interesting take on a variety of aspects, one of which has always stuck with me, that says, wherever there is separation, there is always going to be conflict. Where there is unity, conflict cannot begin to fester. And all the ways that we as humans have found that we can separate ourselves, politically, religious, black, white, I'm American, you're from Mexico or Canadian or from the other side of the world. And we have all of these things that are very, very real and apparent in the external world. But that idea of separation opens the doorway for some type of conflict to begin to enter in. And so I was sitting with it and asking myself, well, what would it be to really embody unity? Not to ask everybody, well, look, we're one, think like this, but what can I do to begin to recognize that? And if I can embrace or at least align with this thought thought pattern or conscious idea of unity, does that start to diminish or dissolve the conflicts that are taking place within my mind? Because there are many wars being waged within ourselves, and the external world is the effect of that inner causation, as we often teach. And so what would it be to truly embrace this idea of unity internally without having to express it to anybody? What would that look like?
It's interesting you say that, because I got a response back from Dr. Edwards' social media, or the post that he put out there. And there was, and it was an absolutist, I would call them a religious science absolutist response to what was written. And, you know, an absolutist would look at all these situations and say, you know, you don't focus on the condition, you turn into whatever the mental equivalent is of the healed condition. In fact, having conversations around separation only creates more separation, because you're emphasizing the separation instead of the unification.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I have trouble processing that. I mean, I've never seen myself as a religious science absolutist. I mean, I'm more of a Thomas Troward guy. I do believe in error, accident, mistake, those kinds of things. And only because I think it justifies my position in going, what the hell? Why is this happening? So it's not really valid. But it's my own personal way of going, what the hell? I don't understand. So, but an absolutist would say focusing on the separation is actually creating more separation within ourselves. So how do you and I acknowledge within ourselves this separation, but only speak of unity without talking about the discord? That's going to be the challenge.
Yes. Yeah, that is a great question. Well, as I've said, when we sat down after the George Floyd incident and a variety of the marches that happened last year, we can't, from my perspective, I cannot just completely bypass the reality of what many people are experiencing by way of saying that I'm taking this high road of spiritual truth. Can I begin to apply the spiritual truth ideas, principles, to begin to transform what I or others are experiencing in the world? But with that said, am I able to internally begin to go through a process of identifying and aligning with this unity in such a way that I begin to show up differently, and I begin to resolve the conflicts that nobody sees inside of myself and show up differently? That's I don't know if I answered it, but that's kind of what pops in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the teachings of Raymond Charles Barker, which I've been doing a lot of, he's one of my favorites. Raymond is not an absolutist, because Raymond actually, in his when he teaches how to pray, he actually teaches the 7-step method. I don't know if you're aware of the 5-step, 7-step. Anyway, there's 5 steps. We believe in our center, and a lot of centers, we believe in 5 steps of prayer, which is recognition, unification, declaration, thanksgiving, and release, right? That's how we do that. In Raymond Charles Barker and a lot of other religious scientists, they have the recognition, unification, they have the declaration, then they have an argumentative step, and they have a reaffirmation and gratitude release. So they go to 7 steps, but they have this denial and reaffirmation. And I think part of the thing is what we teach is that we don't have to talk about the things we need to deny, right? But there is this necessity to talk about the things that are happening so it's such a fine line that we have to fly on, because it's so frustrating, because I think, we shouldn't be talking about this subject. We should be talking about what it looks like in that divine world pattern. Because what we're experiencing isn't the divine world pattern, because there is this conflict, there is this chaos, there is this discord. So how do we get back to that divine pattern without actually learning from one another on how to have these discussions? Let's see. David Alexander. Oh my God.
David Alexander just popped into the chat.
No, naming what is so is just that. Affirmative prayer requires that you name the condition. Well, some people believe that, David. Some people don't. If you look at if you look at the teachings of other teachers in religious science, that's not the case. You don't have to name the condition. You only talk about it. So there has always been a fundamental difference in the teachings of the science of mind about naming the condition or not naming it. So there's two different approaches to that. And I'm of the mindset, David, that I believe what you're saying. In prayer, though, that's not how we've been taught. That's not what I was taught. It's just different. We don't name the condition. We only talk about it. So we only talk about the healed condition, the mental equivalent. So a prayer for prosperity wouldn't talk about scarcity, because that would be igniting the fires of scarcity in our consciousness. So there's a debate about that. So David and I, and many of us, we all have this. There's always been the 5-step, 7-step great debate. But David, I can't believe you're listening. That's cool. By the way, for people who don't know, Dr. David Alexander is the spiritual leader in the Atlanta community, right?
Yep.
Atlanta, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Atlanta. And he and Reverend Charles are really close friends. So this is cool. I like watching this. Okay, good. So David, we have different opinions, and that's good. Not seen separate. Hey, you can tell I don't have my glasses. Not seen. It's like saying I don't see the color. It's just a bypass. If you don't see the separation, then you can't distinguish the tomatoes from beans in the grocery store. Okay. You and I are probably not going to agree on this, so we're going to agree to disagree, because I've always been taught, and through all of my training, through Dr. Tom Costa, Frank Richelieu, all of those people, that this is the way we approach it. Now, I know that I wouldn't be initiating a prayer if I didn't know that there was a condition that needed to change. That's what I would say. I would say I'm recognizing that something needs to change, but in the context of the steps of my prayer, I don't need to tell God what's already happening. The universe already knows what's happening. It's up to me to see it rightly. So one thing that I've always found about that is that I don't need to tell, and I always tell when I teach this, I say, you don't need to tell God what your problems are. The universe already knows what the problems are. It already knows of the condition, and now it's seeking the healed condition through our consciousness, through that open door of the storehouse of ideas. So David and I, we'll agree to disagree, David. Okay.
Well, can I say something, Dr. Joe, real quick? I do think that you and I have touched on this. I know Rev Charles and I have, with regards to acting as if there is no separation in the external world, or failing to recognize the seeming separation by way of maybe race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identification, all of those things that tend to separate us or cause these conflicts that many different people are truly experiencing. I think that we both can agree that we are not talking about completely ignoring the external reality that billions of our brothers and sisters on this planet are facing. Absolutely. Instead, we are turning our attention inward and asking, what consciousness do I have to assume to begin to show up in a world where I can then reflect this idea of unity, while not bypassing the real injustice or difficulty or chaos that I or people around me might be experiencing, but I can begin this transformative process.
And how do I apply love to this? That's the end result. How do I see this in love, not fear? Like you were just talking about your quote from Martin Luther King. How do I see this courageously to make change instead of afraid? And what was the last line in that? One more time with the last line of that quote.
Yeah. So courage breeds creativity. Courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles.
Okay. So I love it. Despite the obstacles, because I'm going to see them, we're going to recognize them. How do I approach this in a loving way? I'm telling you, what I've been watching, I don't know about you, but what I watch on social media, the great debate between people, how it's kind of crazy. I always think to myself as I'm reading this, where is this concept of love and unity in any of the conversation? It doesn't exist. We have two polar opposite, and it feels like there are two totally polar opposite approaches to this. And the ones just keep separating from themselves, and there's no effort whatsoever to build that bridge of love into this and go, you know what? Like the first comment that came in earlier, wouldn't it be great if we could just somehow at the end of the day, allow each other to see each other and hear each other? And then maybe, just maybe, the opening would happen if you didn't have to walk away feeling like you lost in the debate. where we finally threw in the towel and went, "Oh my God, I'm going to bed. I can't fight this anymore." I know that there's this exhaustion that's happening out there. This feeling of, tossing in the towel. I can't continue to fight like this. I hear this, and I mean, and I watch it. I try to stay out of it. I don't know about you.
Yes.
When I see things like that, my first response is to go like this to the computer. And then type up this huge response. And then right before I want to hit send, something, if I'm alone, something in me tells me, no, don't post that. And then, or like, thank God my husband's around. He'll go, you don't want to send that. You really
Yeah, right.
send that, because that's not going to get the response you think it's going to get. You're putting yourself out there to just become a target. So back up and let's look at this in an hour. Let's not do this at this moment. And that's what I think is going to have to happen, especially this week. As all this stuff happens, we can all get caught up in a lot of drama of stuff. We can all get caught up in an energy, but I just keep telling myself to continue to look at what can be, regardless of politics, what can be the end result of this? What can be the movement forward in COVID? What can be the movement forward in Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter? And what can be the forward movement so that we can start bridging all of this stuff so that somehow we come to this this pairing of humanity and the discord and finally get to a place where, we can just talk to each other and not feel threatened by one another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I see. David Alexander shared, okay, if all we see is a hill condition, then I think that would manifest as more people engaged in building the beloved community. Prayer results in action. So where is the demonstrated actions of a world that works for everybody?
Are you asking the question, David? Because I feel like you and I, David, both know, and Jeffon, I think all three of us, the actions they're being demonstrated by this very conversation. But by us having this conversation and putting it into the world however we can, prayer will yield the result in action. And I think that it's necessary for those people who are capable of articulating it the way we do it and the way David does it, and Reverend Charles and Jeffon and all the leaders around here. Whenever we can put that out there, that is the action being demonstrated. We are creating that world. And if one person, and we've all say this, and it sounds kind of trite, but to me, it's true. If one person can jump in and actually have that experience of going, okay, I'm changing my mind about how I view something because of it's finally gotten to that point where there's finally enough information on overwhelm. There's finally enough love in the room where they feel safe to change their perspective. And I think that's one of the things that I'm looking at. People need to feel there's actually a group of people that I've been talking to that don't feel safe to come out and speak their mind and say something because of their friends and because of their family. They're going, I just can't say that out loud because it's just going to go against my family and friends, and I just can't take that stand. And I'm like, well, then you need to stand in it and you don't have to take it publicly, but you have to live from it and be a little less, I hate to say this, be a little less tolerant of people who are speaking things that are in violation of that idea for yourself. Just to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable having this conversation. I have found that I don't know about you, but I've stepped away from people a lot lately when they're engaging in these certain levels of discourse. When I find myself I see that there's too much anger and fear, I have to back my way out and go, you know what? I'm not going to try to change your mind.
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah. And maybe that's not my job. Maybe there have been many seeds that have been sown within all of our consciousness and our hearts that may blossom and may unfold, and some of them may just simply lie dormant. So perhaps I can share something that may be positive in nature, compassionate in nature, empowering in nature, but I'm not here to try to make you see the world that I see the world. Yeah. one thing that I want to say is when Dr. David Alexander said the demonstrated actions, a world that works for everybody. And I've shared this with Rev Charles quite often, is perhaps in order to create a world that works for everybody, I myself must venture into the deep caverns of my own consciousness, heart, being, and spirit, and recognize all the ways that I participate in a world that does not work for everybody. And in doing so, I can bring that light of awareness. I can bring that light of courage. I can bring that light of empowerment with me to begin to show up that then reflects or echoes that sentiment of creating a world that works for everybody. And as Dr. Charles said, or Rev Charles said, we find what we're looking for. Energy goes where focus flows, I think, or focus goes where energy flows. I guess it can two sides of the same coin there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because and this, I'm going to put this out there because this is food for thought. If we want to build a world that works for everyone, it's not necessarily the world that we're thinking is working for us. I mean,
yes.
That we have this assumption. We have this assumption almost that building a world that works for everybody is building the world that works for me and my philosophy, because it seems more open and accepting. But that means the people that don't feel that way, that they're wrong and I'm right. So this has been the thing that I've been grappling with the most over the past 10 months, is this feeling of building a world that works for everybody doesn't necessarily mean that it has to work for me in every area. It's just, I shouldn't say it that way. I have to be able to accept that there's going to be differences of opinion and it works for them. And I just have to make it, there are things that I just have to accept for people, except for people doing what they do. And that's really hard to do, because if it doesn't comply with my paradigm, I want to toss it out and go, no, you're wrong, because that doesn't work for me. And they're like, well, you don't work for me. Your philosophy is not working for me. Well, you're not working. Okay. So where do we go with that? Where do you go to say, let's find the common ground? Hang on. Deborah wrote something. I want to say this. I love Jeffon's insight about aligning the inner conflict with, that nobody sees. I've been thinking about bearing witness as an act of spiritual service. True. Staying truly present in the current condition and doing the inner conversation allows us to outpicture it at a higher level of coherence. This is not a passive posture. Deborah, I like that idea. I do. I like that idea. Becoming the observer and bearing witness to this. Bearing witness without an opinion. That's or without, I don't want to say without an opinion. Bearing witness without feeling like I need to change what I'm witnessing. Does that make sense?
I think I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Too many times I'll bear witness thinking, oh, this needs to change. And I'm like, okay, but does it? All right. I think it does. How do I go ahead and how do I create that in my mind? Because if I say that, then that's making someone wrong and someone right. How do you do that? You know what we should have done? Now that David was on there and Charles, we just should have plugged them into the call.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we should do a 4-way conversation.
It'd be powerful. I see that Dr. David Alexander said we must be willing to decolonize our mind. And I think that this comes down to a Martin Luther King quote that we do not hear often. It was in the early 60s. He said, "The world now demands a maturity of America that we may not be able to achieve." The same consciousness that we've used in the past that's brought us to this point, perhaps there must be some transcended type of consciousness that individually, those of us who help create this that we call America, must be able to assume to shift and create something new. Come in, definitely in alignment with decolonizing our mind. That requires us to have that sense of courageousness to begin to recognize the ways that we've benefited and privileged from things that do not create a world for everybody. And then shifting that focus and attention, not as if we're shaming somebody to death or pointing somebody, making them feel we have to recognize what's happening, but we must be willing to show up in a way that then can begin to open the doorway to something transformational. So anyways, in that decolonizing my mind, this is when I was in Standing Rock, when my wife was in residency in North Dakota, in the pipeline stuff, and being able to go there on Standing Rock on the res. She's from a different reservation in South Dakota, but really this whole idea of decolonization and the ways in which we can begin to approach that, what that requires from an individual standpoint, and then recognizing how that then sends ripples out into the environment that opens the doorway for more equity and human equality, which is that inherent worth that I began our conversation with, that is dwelling within everybody. Anyways.
And I think it goes, yeah, something you said, I just resonated with me, and I just wanted to speak to it. You know, building a world that works for everybody is going to require that we also look at everyone else's world and not think it has to be my world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So,
so you're so you're telling me that my world doesn't work for everybody.
No, that's what I'm talking about. Wait a minute, how can I be wrong? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. If you only knew. If you only knew, Dr. Joe.
Are things that are separate, are things that separate us bad? Can we not celebrate the things that separate us? Celebrate our different points of view, our different colors, our different backgrounds and points of view. Is it diversity that we can gain the capacity to see all the aspects of spirit? If we resist these other points of view, do they not persist and become stronger? Should we just accept that there are differences of opinion, or seek to understand and celebrate these differences?
Yes. Yes.
Yes and yes. Yeah. Yes and yes. That's absolutely what it's required. There's an intolerance, I think. I'll just say this. There's an intolerance on all sides of things, I think. There's an intolerance because if, Jeffon, someone says something to you that totally violates everything you believe in, there is this inner intolerance to go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hearing this. This is just wrong. It's just wrong. Do you agree?
Yeah.
You think, so, and then of course, when I'm speaking my truth, people, they think that too is, they're like, Joe's crazy. He's out of his mind.
Can I mention something very quickly, Dr. Joe, with regards to that, celebrating the differences? Absolutely. What would happen, because we recognize wherever two people are gathered together, diversity is present. There are differences even if you look just like the same person.
I lost my thing.
You're transcending. I mean, you're just creating a new universe.
I'm losing it. Like, now my green screen is messing up.
Right, it's okay. There you go.
Go ahead.
No, so this idea of bridging differences instead of allowing the differences that exist between us as humans to create barriers that prevent equity, equality, inclusion, celebration, human equality. I mean, all of that stuff. So can we, and this is what I ask myself, can I begin to recognize the various dimensions of diversity that exist, whether they're human dimensions, race, ethnicity, sex, gender identification, any of those things, cultural dimensions, belief, worldview, religion, political affiliation? Can I begin to honor and recognize those differences and consciously bridge them instead of allowing them to create these barriers that seem impassable or unable to get over, around, under, or through? What mentality or consciousness do I have to assume to embrace the differences and bridge them in a way that can create something new for the individuals involved?
So to answer your question, you just posed the question. Now help yourself. Now let's answer it.
Okay.
No, but how do we answer that? How do we answer that? How do we answer, what do I need to do?
What I feel as if needs to happen is, and it kind of circles back to one of the conversations that we had a little earlier, is to truly be present with the individuals who I have the opportunity to interact with, to be mindful and attentive of the dimensions of diversity that trigger me in a way that make me habitually react instead of consciously respond, and then beginning from that standpoint to create something that may be new, different, or transformational in nature.
That's where we're going to end it. That's where we're going to end today, because guess what? You just gave the prescription for what we need to do today. You just did it. Jeffon, you just encapsulated the whole idea. So that's where we end up today. And that's what, you know what? And think about it. That's exactly what the holiday's celebrating, isn't it?
That is.
I mean, isn't that it? Okay, you're gonna have to help me read. Can you read the comment line? I got 2 comments that we're gonna close.
Okay. So
I can't read it.
Dr. David Alexander said, to me, a world that works is clearly detailed as the beloved community. It has tangible benchmarks and outpicturing. I think we're both in alignment with that. And then another comment said, so enjoying these important discussions. I am on a committee in travel called DEIA, Diversity, Equality, Equity, Inclusion, and I'm organizing a speakers bureau. Can I obtain Jeffon's info for potentially inviting him to speak at a conference? And I say, I'm the only Jeffon Seely in the world. I think you type in my name in Google and I will pop up there.
See, Jeffon, networking happens when you don't expect it. People want to hear what you have to say. The last one is this, let me know, Joe, if you, oh yeah, that's for me. Let me know. So you know what? I do want to, what a reality is. I can't read this though.
Your reality is shifting, Joe, Dr. David Alexander said.
Yeah. You know what my reality is doing, David? It's planning to retire. That's what my reality is. That's going to be, and whatever happens after that, I have no idea. But that's my current reality, shifting to that new place. All right. So in closing today, the last thing we're going to do, we'll talk about, please continue to help develop our center, create our center, support our center. There's obviously with COVID, there's been a lot of changes, and we just continue to ask you to lovingly support our beloved community so we can continue to do what we're doing, which I believe is, moving the needle. It may be a little bit, but every single time we broadcast, and we've done close to 200 or almost 300 different shows now. 300 different shows every day at 10 o'clock. We're doing something. So I don't know how many faith communities are putting something apps out every single day at 10 o'clock, but our center's been committed to keep us connected, especially at the time during COVID and lockdown. And I can't wait to see how we work this out in the future. So please continue to support us. We definitely would like to see that. In closing, Jeffon, thank you so much. I'll have you back again in a couple of weeks, maybe. We can continue our chat. Is that good?
That sounds great.
That sounds great. I'm really jealous of Reverend Charles that he got to spend the time on the golf course with you. Oh, and speaking of Reverend Charles, he is teaching a new class called Beyond Limits. And it's going to be an amazing class that's online. It starts next Monday. If you haven't enrolled yet, please do. It's an opportunity to really engage in going, beyond the limits that we have today. And we were talking about that earlier, to break through stop waiting for the change to happen, just start creating it. And this class will help you do that in a very structured and loving way. Will help you see clearly where you want to go next. So again, Jeffon, thank you. And I want to close. We're going to play the Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. I hope it's the right one because I couldn't get it uploaded on before I got to the show. But I'm hoping that we have the right I Have a Dream speech. It's about 4 minutes long. And I just want to say thank you guys. Thank you, Jeffon. Thank you, Jeff, team. David Alexander, thank you for joining in the conversation. I need to put you on here. You and I need to have a conversation one time too. All right. Have a blessed day. And Crystal and Jeff, can you please turn that on? Listen to the words of Martin Luther King as we celebrate the holiday today. Thank you, Jeffon.
Thank you.
Great seeing
you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day Even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty.